All right. Well, we have already had a little bit of a preliminary chat. I'm speaking with Canadian composer and professor, if I may say so, and musician, guitarist. We'll talk all about that. Andrew Paul MacDonald, about your 2022 Centre Disc. How'd I do? Release with the, here we go, Quatuor Saguenay. We'll talk about that. It's actually basically the Saguenay Quartet. There is a city,
Yeah.
Saguenay, in Quebec State. We had that discussion, and I finally found my way down the highway on that one. The CD is called Music of the City and the Stars, and it's really very interesting. That's why it caught my eye. I was as I mentioned in my idiocy about guitars. I thought this was interesting, and of course it turns out to be somewhat, but not nearly as fascinating as I thought it might be about the instrument that you use. We're talking electric guitar, and in this case, maybe we better jump in. Tell me about this bowed guitar. I know that's completely wrong description. Help us, get me out of this, and then we'll mention the works.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for having me on the show.
Sure.
And yeah, the electric archtop guitar is basically an acoustic instrument with what's called a floating pickup. That means it doesn't touch the body of the guitar. And it's called an archtop because the top of the guitar is curved, like a violin or cello, and it
Interesting.
does affect the sound. The instrument that I play is made by Oscar Graf, a Canadian luthier who's not making guitars anymore. But I commissioned this guitar from him. Actually, I saw it hanging in his shop in pieces. He lives near Kingston, Ontario, and I saw it hanging up in his workshop. And I said, I want that guitar, but I'll pay you cash for this if you'll personalize it a little bit for me. So I had
Oh,
him add an extra fret to the guitar, so it has 22 frets, so I can go up to a high D, and which I actually use in one of the pieces, I think in Restless City,
is
and
that what I heard? Okay, go ahead.
and he also did some nice little things like he has my initials on the fingerboard and a few other
For the
little
museum, along
yeah.
with your leather-bound memoirs. I understand completely. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this instrument is it's kind of it's the same type of instrument that most jazz guitars play. And this is how I started with this instrument. I thought I would just play jazz music, and I played a lot of jazz music on it. And then I realized, I think I could play some of my favorite classical tunes because I was trained as a classical guitarist. And I realized that most of the standards, the Giuliani, the Fernando Sor, etc., they didn't work. The technique wasn't appropriate. But I started transcribing Bach and Brahms and Beethoven and Schubert. I do the Arpeggione Sonata on this instrument, and it sounds wonderful. So yeah, so why not write my own music as well and play it as solo or with other musicians, which I do a lot.
And before we get out of control here, we'd better check your credentials.
Yeah.
Andrew Paul
Okay.
MacDonald appointed the Order of Canada in 2021. I didn't roll out the red carpet. I do apologize. Winner of the 1995 Juno Award for Best Classical Composition for your violin concerto. You know, I had a look because I wondered, and I had a look at your portfolio, and it must be at least a 5 volume portfolio. You know, it just goes on forever. All kinds of major orchestral works and chamber works, and a couple, at least one opera. Yeah, I think two, right?
Two.
Two. Well, we can't talk about that this time around. But anyway, uh, of course, recorded by some of Canada's great musicians and so on. And as a guitarist, as you've mentioned, you were trained as a classic in the classical tradition. I wonder if this is the time to mention that, and then you discovered how this repertoire would work with archtop electric guitar. And then you mentioned before we filmed something about when you mentioned about technique, this idea of a new technique. Was that based on, I think you had some arthritis problems or something, or
Yeah.
based on the instrument itself, I guess is the question.
No, well, it started with arthritis in my hands, which is a fatal note to any musician
Yeah.
who uses their hands to play. And I couldn't play the traditional big repertoire that I used to play on the classical guitar. I did all those big concertos and that sort of thing. So that bothered me a lot. But I started using a pick between my thumb and my index finger, and the other three fingers to pluck the strings and to do artificial harmonics and that sort of stuff. Yeah. And I did lots and lots of exercises and wrote etudes to practice these new techniques from a
rehab. I think they call it rehab.
It was music therapy for me, physical though, and then started transcribing a lot of classical repertoire. Like I mentioned earlier, the B minor Partita by Bach, beautiful piece. I have a nice recording of that, a video recording of that. Maybe I'll put a link on for our.
We'll put it up. You'll send it to me. I'll put it up. By the way, all of this goes up. The interview, the link to get the CD, all that stuff goes up at performingartsreview.net when I put up the page. So yeah, continue, please.
Yeah. So I'm reborn. It's like the phoenix. I have a new lease on life, my musical life, and that's very exciting. I work with a pianist, and we do lots of concerts together at Carmen Picar. And
you have website for the duo and for the trio that you are part of, so I'll get those up as well. Yeah.
Well, yeah, for my jazz trio too. Yeah. And I do concertos with orchestra, but with electric guitar. So I wrote a concerto for myself to play, and I played it with the local orchestra here. I'm arranging bookings for more performances of that. Yeah. And just having a lot of fun.
Good. And there's something about, you mentioned, of course, whenever we have a debilitating problem that comes up, one can't help but have a bit of depression, but go through a period of that. But you know what? I have a feeling you were a positive personality anyway. I mean, you just radiate that kind of positive personality. I'm the same kind of person. When I get depressed, I really get into it and like it and enjoy it and meditate on it. And then I always pop out. And I'm glad that you have taken the bull by the horns, or the strings by their fingers or something. And just saying, this hurts. Let me see how it works. You know what I mean? Basically, something like that. So interesting. When did you, because the support artists on this CD are, oh boy, I just forgot, Quatuor Saguenay.
Beautiful.
From the city of Saguenay. Thank you. You're too complimentary, too kind, cousin. But when did you kind of run into those guys, and how'd that work, ending up on the CD?
Yeah. So we've known each other for over 20 years. At that time, I think it was 2000. They had actually, I knew them before. I met them before that. That's when they first played a piece of mine, my fourth string quartet, and they were known as the Alcan Quartet at that time. And then they went through a name change about 4, maybe 5 years ago, because Alcan pulled out its funding, but the city of Saguenay stepped in and provided their funding, and so therefore they just changed their name. It made sense to do that.
And therefore, it can only happen in Canada.
Yeah,
can you imagine a city stepping in and say, "Well, string quartet. Oh, you just lost your funding. Well, hey, we'll hire you for the next 20 years. Come on in." It's crazy. I love it. Very Canadian somehow, very European as well, and so forth. And there are other. I don't mean to be too harsh on my countrymen, but there are other incidents. I'm thinking of the Del Porte, I think, string quartet in New England, who had kind of the same thing, kind of a certain level of funding fell out from under them, which had been supporting them for many, many years, and through other means, they managed to carry on. So that's good. And they've done lots of CDs, I think, over the years. If I'm thinking correct, or where does this fit in? You have any idea? In terms of their own recordings.
The Alcan Saguenay Quartet, they've done.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Like 30 or more recorded. They've done many. I should check the exact number, but it's a lot. Yeah. And like, how many concerts? 1,500 concerts, radio broadcasts, TV. I mean, it's like, when you're together for 30. They got together in 1989, so that's 34 years. That's a lot.
It adds up. Yeah. And I think we went through this one. I'm just kind of running through some of my questions, and then we'll get to the music itself a little bit. Sure. But you began on classical guitar, correct?
That's right.
Now, when did the evil of jazz and rock and roll infiltrate your otherwise pure
Yeah.
upbringing? What?
Good,
When?
good question. Just a little footnote there. Actually, when I was quite young, I played electric guitar.
I thought so. Okay, you
Yeah,
finally confessed. Okay, so it started as a rock and roll kid.
I was a rock and roll kid, and I learned a little bit of jazz when I was a kid too. But then I put all of that away, put it behind me when I was 16 years old.
That's
I was
amazing, actually. That's
I was
something.
I was a bit of a rock virtuoso, and I was playing with kids who were a lot older than I was too. Got my parents a little bit worried about that sort of thing, bad influence, etc. But they were a little happier when I got into classical music. It was a new discovery. I'd never heard classical guitar before, and then I started learning about Beethoven and Mozart and Debussy and Bartok. Wow, Stravinsky.
See,
Show me
that's
more. I
you
went to the
give me
local.
hope. You give me hope.
Yeah,
And I don't mean that even facetiously. It's of course the brain waves that are going on in each and every one of us. But at some point, your brain waves were ready, for this other leap.
yeah.
It's amazing. But I'm glad you did the confession here on my little interview. So thank you very much. From the very beginning, I thought, because I'm from two generations before that, there's no such thing as, being a rock and roll player and then going to the academy or something. No, no, no,
Yeah,
no, no. It's classical, 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 classical. And by the way, I'm very glad to be moving beyond that.
yeah.
It's okay not to wear a white tie and tailcoat, although we
Sure.
all look spiffy in them and so on. But anyway, I'm making fun, but the point is, it's amazing. And by the way, you're not alone. Actually, I admire musicians that are in whatever that age area is. I don't want to go there to embarrass either of us, but who have been through the rock and roll stage and stay there and love it and come back to it and are getting their master's degree at USC and stuff. It just blows my brains out, and it's all good. Okay, well, that settled that one. Then we got that one sorted out. Let's see, and just give me a little something about the recording itself. I'm not an acoustician or anything. I'm just a musician, but I'm always kind of curious. You mentioned this, and there are pictures that we'll put up at the site of this wonderful, lots of wood site. What is that used all the time as a recording studio, or is it a church in the neighborhood, or what?
It's the church. It's the main church in the village of La Terrière, and it's used as a church like all the time. In fact, we had difficulty getting enough time in there to do the
Yeah.
recording, but they 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 moved their services to another location. The
Oh,
daily service.
sweet. Yeah.
But there were things that went on like during the day where we couldn't record during those particular times. But nevertheless, it's this église, as they en français, église La Terrière. It is beautiful acoustics in there, and so really the engineer Larry O'Malley, a francophone from Quebec, long time
I'll
because
meditate on that. A francophone from
the
Quebec,
Irish the
O'Malley.
yeah, the Irish moved to Quebec, immigrated here.
Of course, in the
It's
40s, 1840s.
many, many, many years ago.
Yeah.
They intermarried with the francophones, and then some of them just stopped speaking English. And it's interesting. I've come across sometimes people with names like that who don't speak any English at all. But Larry, he's an internationally recognized recording engineer. He speaks English very, very well. But he had ideas about the use of this church. No artificial sound at all, just the sound of the acoustics of the church itself. And he had microphones placed up close to our instruments, and some overhead, and then some further back in the hall. And then he mixed all of that together to come up with that wonderful sound quality with
Yeah,
which he
very,
did
very
this
nice.
record.
Yeah, very nice. And have we discussed, I just want to make clear what what had a quandary about the difference in sound. I don't think we have yet. You haven't explained yet. In lyra, the sound of the instrument, of the guitar, of the electric guitar, is a little bit different. It's a little compared to in the second piece, which is which is a different bit of amplification and reverb and loops and all the rest. You want to give me a little overview of that so people get an idea? We're talking about lyra, which we'll get into in a
Okay.
bit, from
Yeah.
2021? No, 2020. Well,
20. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So with Restless City, it's just the straight sound of the acoustic archtop guitar amplified,
Yeah,
just pure sound. The In Lyra, I have a processor in between my guitar cord and the amplifier, which alters the sound of the instrument, different types of echo effects that I had programmed to use in this composition. So there are, I can't remember, but at least a half dozen different types of process sounds that I use in the course of the piece, and I was controlling them all with a foot pedal. And to do this live is a challenge. In a recording, of course, you could stop and redo something and switch the pedals. You don't hear the click of the pedal when the change is being made. But yeah, that's essentially the difference. And I wanted to have two very different sounding compositions, both recorded in the same space, that give different perspectives of what I do and contribute to the aesthetic as a whole.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, because as I mentioned to you, I too was a bit confused by this sound that was, as in my amateur way of listening to this without your knowledge, I kept thinking a little too much reverb. There's a little too much reverb. I didn't realize there were loops kind of going on and other stuff. So it is a completely different work in that sense. And also we've had that chat because Lyra is certainly the most. It's different. That's not the right thing. I was going to say the most contemporary of the two works on the program, and that's really not so. You know what I'm trying to say? It's really a misnomer on my part. They're both fabulous, but Lyra to me was the more difficult, I guess, to begin to hear.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, I listened to it, had a chance to listen to it a second time, and ooh, everything started to make sense and work. So yeah.
Yeah. The guitar electronic processing that happens there gives the piece a different aura, and I tried to capture that like antiquity sound, the misty past, especially with the open gesture, and
nice. That helps so much because the movements, and let me just, this is quite a tale. Let me jump up here. The movements of Lyra from 2020, Hermes and Apollo, Apollo and Orpheus, Orpheus and the Argonauts, magnificent. I mean, in other words, picture painting after picture painting, Orpheus and Hades, the death of Eurydice, and by the way, that's just exquisite, wonderfully put together. Orpheus and the Bacchantes, Orpheus and Memoriam. I mean, it's really quite a little through written suite.
Yeah,
Is that anywhere close?
It is program music. It's a series of tableaus of these scenes of mainly about Orpheus, but also the travels of the lyre, from its beginnings to its end as a constellation.
Damn, I've got a headache now. This is getting too intellectual. Interesting. Okay, yeah. Carry on, please.
Well, there's lots of different levels to the piece, and hopefully there's something attractive enough on the surface that people will want to go back and listen to it again and again and keep hearing. And then eventually you're going to hear those sevens that we were talking about before.
Because, as per the introduction here, you are examining the constellation Lyra, set in 7 movements that are through composed. There is no pause, right? It moves right through, yeah?
Yeah. Each movement is played second.
It felt like it, too, when I finally got a chance to kind of click them quickly in the format that I was listening to them. And the 7 principal stars of that constellation. In other words, it's wonderful. I love composers. I have another friend, composer, who's into the stars and the universe and stuff and the cosmos. You apparently cover a whole lot more territory than just that. So not to be unclear, based on the repertoire, I'm saying the 4th quartet.
Yeah.
See what I mean? I mean, there's a fraction of your music, I presume, that has been recorded, maybe even. Okay, but this idea of choosing some kind of gigantic pattern and creating a work of, in this case, musical art out of it with a narrative, and so it's mind-boggling. And where'd you get it from? Your mom, your dad, your uncle, what?
Do you want me to talk about the 7s? Because
Please do. I'm sorry, I wandered there in my mystification.
That's okay. Composers like to have, like Stravinsky said this frequently, he liked to have limitations. He liked to have restrictions. so that he would be able to have something to work within, whether that be, exactly what instruments are we writing for, how long is the piece going to be, how difficult can it be for the performers, a narrative, etc. So I'm a melodic composer. You can tell that from from what you hear there. It's a different kind of melody, of course, but it's still melody and themes and that kind of stuff. So I took these 7 notes. Why did I choose 7? Well, because there are 7 principal stars in the constellation Lyra. This is according to the ancients, the 7 stars that they could see with the naked eye. Okay. And then the lyre itself traditionally had 7 strings. So those were to correspond with the stars, or whatever reasons. There are musical reasons, I'm sure, but there are also these mythological reasons as well. And so I took that idea and said, okay, I can make a theme up with 7 notes. Easy peasy. And my opening gesture, that very trippy kind of opening music.
Mysterious setup of an introduction is what I have here on my stream of consciousness thoughts. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah. So there are 7 chords that I play, just big strumming arpeggiated chords, and the quartet is doing a tremolo underneath, basically the same thing. The top note in each one of the chords are the 7 notes of the 7-note theme.
I'll go back and listen to it some more. Okay, now you've told me the secret. Thank you.
But that 7-note theme comes up like many, many times throughout the course of the piece. There are 7 principal sections or movements to the work. In the Orpheus and Hades section, with all the aleatoric stuff in the extended.
Yeah. Hang on, I'm going down there. Yeah.
Okay, so I organized the seven sections according to the 7 trials that Orpheus had to go through in his journey through Hades, and I used a sustained note. See, one of the players in the quartet is always doing a sustained note, and I traded around the group, and that sustained note is a long, extended version of the first note of the theme, then the second note of the theme, etc. And in each one of these packages, the group does their extended techniques, and then the next note of the theme will be held as a long note in one of the other instruments, and everybody changes to another extended technique. And so that's how I put that passage together. We rehearsed it a few times, and once I explained it to the group, it just came together just like that. And we had so much fun. Every time we do that section, it's going to be a little bit different because it's improvised.
Thank you very much for that. That was marvelous and wonderful and fascinating, and quite so. About getting it. It takes a little time. Even the players, it takes a little time and a little explanation and so on. But also it tells me never trust a composer. Everybody out there, please pay attention. Never trust a composer ever. You are always up to subtext upon subbasement upon subtext upon structural this and structural that, and the formulas are all really opaque and complex and fabulous. So thank you for that. I think you're the first composer to really just let it all hang out. So thanks very much. Just using that one example let alone the piece itself and discovering, I don't know where you were or what brought it on, but suddenly something went 7. I'm seeing 7. There's 7. The trials of and bingo. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the brilliant thing. So you realize, everybody, I'm kidding about never trust composers, but they're sly foxes. All of you, every composer I've known. You always look at us and smile. You never tell us a thing. Today we got some true confessions out of you about what to look for and listen to. Excuse me for rattling on. Let's talk for a minute about the wonderful effects. We've kind of jumped around a little bit, but now we are we're in the movement that really got me. The death of Eurydice. These sounds like satellite transmissions in my stream of consciousness. Was that happening in the quartet somewhere, or on the guitar, or what? How?
Are we talking about the kind of wide whistling kind of
yeah, that sort of thing. Okay. That reminds me of satellites going by in the night sky.
Right.
Or something. That effect.
That's a technique that is just. It comes from the last section of Orpheus and Hades, where the players are doing a technique which is called the seagull technique, where they slide as they're bowing, they slide up and down the string, and they're exciting the different harmonics on that string.
Yeah.
And that bleeds over into the next section of the piece, the death of Eurydice.
Gotcha.
And
Oh,
so,
now I get it. I see.
yeah, so that's where
I
you're hearing
see.
that. And then that movement, which I think they played very, very beautifully in this recording, that movement is a seven because it's a 7-note Passacaglia. So the Passacaglia theme
You mentioned in the notes.
vibrates around the quartet, but it's a 7-note Passacaglia. So we like that. We like things like that.
Forgive me, but that impish smile just kills me. We like that. Yeah. Have you gotten past sevens yet?
Well, sevens were perfect for that piece. There's something about seven. It's asymmetrical, and it's just something really beautiful. Fours, all the eights and 16s are pretty predictable.
And yet you chose some kind of 5/4 tempo in there. Please explain how that becomes seven. I don't remember which movement it was, but that 5/4 movement, and then there's a waltz or something. I seem to recall.
There is a waltz in the second.
I'm pulling you a little bit, but
no, it does sound kind of waltzy. It's this Hermes and Apollo. It has a kind of a slow It has a kind of a slow Viennese waltz.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I get it. Sorry, I'll never let you get over this. Orpheus in Memoriam, things kind of go back to the beginning mysteries, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I mean, that was probably obvious by the third hearing. Maybe I would really say, don't even ask. But again, intoning these 7 notes, believe me, I will not go to bed tonight until I hear all 7 of those notes. And then I too will be plagued with this curse of the 7. More importantly, this idea of how the piece works into this meditative, reflective mood. It's a very classic, brief, descending denouement. That's what I called it, to settle it out.
Did you notice anything different about that when that material recurred, just on your first listening?
Did I sign up for any of your classes? Is this a pass-fail thing or what? I guess I didn't.
Okay, well, you did notice that similarity, which is important. Because
thank you for that, Professor.
Yeah, but everything is a semitone higher.
I didn't
lifted up to the heavens. There's that semitone rise there, but also the ending changes. So it starts in, we say, C, ends in C sharp. But the cello does this beautiful little melodic thing at the end, which ends on the low C of the cello. So you get this hovering chord, the C sharp harmony, and then this low note on the cello.
Well done. Well done. Yeah, but this is really a lesson, if I may say, in what makes composers work. So thank you very much, because thought is everything. Thought, and more thought. It's not just mechanical. Okay. I guess is it time to look at your earlier work, Restless City from 2017. Yes. What a great title, by the way. It's set in 3 substantial movements. Wait, he'll tell us about the 3s in a minute here. It's a beautiful, what do we call this? It's a quintet for string quartet and electric guitar. Yeah. Restless City in 3 movements. It's the composition is an homage to bebop jazz artists, and that's when I began to get the shakes. I started this morning when I was getting ready. I thought, oh no, I know nothing about this. So bebop jazz artists, what? Charlie Parker, I recognize that one. Tad Dameron, I didn't recognize that name. And of course, Thelonious Monk. So 3 movements, each dedicated to one of these 3 composers. And that helped me make sense of, for example, the first movement, Bird Talk.
Yes.
That's cute. Tribute to Charlie Parker. I liked it. You'll be happy to hear this. I liked it immediately. Fell right into it, so I guess I'm okay. In other words, I was nervous because when you're out of your territory a little bit.
Sure.
When everybody knows all about some of these things. But it's just, all I want to say generally, and then I'll throw it over to you, is here in Restless City in these 3 movements, the compositional technique, the beautiful way. I mean, everything compositionally was just grabbed my attention immediately. The way, and again, it was the difference in sound also, because as you said, it was a kind of straight up acoustic sound, if you will,
Yes.
recording. So I could hear everything so much cleaner, if you will.
Yep.
That's not a criticism. It's just that it was a whole different idea. And thank you for clarifying these differences that you want in these two pieces. But that's what just grabbed my attention. Is there a Parker tune in there, by the way, in the first movement,
There,
Berto?
there's no Parker tunes. I think I've played everything by Charlie Parker. I've arranged like every piece of his that I could think of and played it with my jazz trio. And this piece is an evocation of how I feel Charlie Parker's music sounds to my ears, especially the principal theme of the first movement of Bird Talk. So there's not a specific Charlie Parker tune in there, but rather an allusion to his style.
Good, because I didn't think so. And you know how you can kind of tell when there's an homage going on and there's a little fragment here or something, and even I can pick up some of that in jazz. So I'm very pleased to hear that because it's just a fabulous composition all by itself. That movement alone, Bird Talk, and again this commingling of quartet. What I really got is, as we have said earlier, now this is where I got fourth quartet. Okay, you know what I mean? In other words, oh yeah, he knows how to write for string quartet. Okay, that's my huge compliment to you, and let alone this integration of the instrument of the electric guitar. It's such a beautiful chamber music instrument in this kind of a more acoustic, amplified acoustic, if you will, I guess, setting. Fabulous. So I saw Damaronics. That's the second movement, and I thought, what? And then, of course, I read the program note. Tad Dameron. It's a little fun play on words. And again, from the tune, If You Could See Me Now. And of course, a huge question mark rose up from my noggin. And it doesn't matter one bit. It's just beautifully, beautifully written. You want to chat about that a little bit, about Damaronics?
Yeah, Damaronics. So it's a play on Tad Dameron and harmonics, because harmonics are featured especially towards the end of the piece, very prominently. And the opening tune. Can you hear that?
Well, I heard the first couple notes, and then it kind of vanished.
Okay. Well, I haven't got.
We tried. Where's your chorus when you need them? You know.
Yeah, I haven't gotten this loud enough. Let me put it a little bit louder. You can always edit this later. And
No, I never edit. Everybody knows that by now. Never.
Oh, here we go. That's the first. Can you hear that? Okay.
Oh yeah, heard it fine.
Okay.
Perfect.
So that's the opening phrase of a song. If you could see me now, by Tad Dameron, which he wrote for Sarah Vaughan, and she recorded it and she performed it a lot. And so I just used the first little bit. Just that, and then everything else I do is a variation on that throughout the rest of the movement.
Wonderful. And by the way, it's a very interesting tune. I would never have thought of it as being a popular tune, if you get my drift. It's whatever. It's French impressionist or something. I don't know. But
well, he came up with some beautiful, beautiful melodies, and he's kind of a forgotten. He's not forgotten to people who were in the know of bebop jazz from the '50s, but he wrote some very beautiful music. And then he had trouble with drugs, and he was imprisoned for possession. And after he got out of jail, he just lived for a couple more years, and it was very, very sad ending for a very, very talented artist. So this is a tribute to him as well. I went through a lot of Tad Dameron's music a number of years ago, and he's one of my heroes, and I want more people to know about his work.
Well, it's a very moving movement of this trio, of this quintet, of the three movements. Very, very beautifully written, as you have made very clear. I see in my just stream of consciousness, this movement is a beautiful tribute to the composer. And so, and I didn't even know who the guy was, but just or that tune even. You see, so you've helped me there. But just that it's with from the heart, if you will, not to sound too corny. Okay, last movement.
Okay. So this is a
Monkin' Around, which is cute as hell, by the way. Took me a while to get it. Then I finally got it, being a classical guy. Okay, monking around, go.
Yeah, Thelonious Monk. Yeah, why not? So I wanted to present in this restless city these three very, very different moods. The first movement, Bird Talk, it's like running around all over the place and crazy.
Interesting.
The second movement, very reflective and emotional. And then the last movement is like a mixture of a whole bunch of different things, just like Monk himself. I mean, he was very, he was an iconoclast, in terms of what he was doing
No idea.
with jazz music and how he's influenced people still to this day in a big way. Anyhow, so this movement is a set of variations on his jazz piece, which has become a standard, called "A Straight No Chaser."
Yeah, straight no chaser. I've heard of the tune of the piece, of course, but I had no idea what the tune was. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I play this piece a lot, and it's full of chromaticism and weird displacement of the beat within the
Mm.
bar. So it's written in 4/4, but
Interesting.
sometimes
Yeah.
the downbeat's on 2, or sometimes it's on 3, and it's very, very interesting for a musician to play this and to improvise on it as well. And basically it's a blues. It's what we call a jazz blues. So how do I take a piece? How do I take something like that and write a set of variations on it for a string quartet and an electric guitar? So it was a big challenge, but everything came very, very easily for me in this piece. So 8 variations on this tune. After this very, very short introduction, we have 3 variations that are very contrapuntal and rich, and they go together as a
As
section.
a set, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a slow variation, and then a pizzicato variation, and then another longer slow variation, and which is quite different than the previous one, and then a very rapid repeated note variation, and then finally for the last one, it's a huge fugue. Fugue with a who writes fugues nowadays, but it just seemed to make sense. So the fugue subject is the theme of Straight No Chaser, the prominent, the memorable part of it. Yeah, and it ends like those great piano quintets.
Yeah,
Uh,
very, very
oh,
okay, my turn. My turn, which is this is the one movement that I did not listen to twice.
mhm.
I'm I'm confessing right up front, and I can see already that I'm going to have to go back and really listen to it again. You realize I'm going to be writing the review coming up, so I'll be listening to everything again. But this one is interesting. I caught this it's a figure in dance, but this segmentation, these variations. I wasn't really counting. I didn't dare after 7. I mean, excuse me. Sorry. Uh, but I loved the variations and the differences in styles and just all of it. I was intrigued. I'm intrigued by the compositional aspects of this melding of electric guitar and quartet in this section, and God knows where that section was. But I mean, these are kind of my takeaways of things. I'll figure it out later when I actually sit down and write the review. But um, uh, and I'm relieved because for a moment there, I really feared that you were doing a double fugue
Oh,
because I thought I was starting to hear something else coming up on top that was an entire, and then later it didn't, I realized it wasn't. But I'm really relieved that you did. I did not get too carried away. It's really clever is a high compliment for me. I think not clever as in artsy fartsy or anything like that, but beautifully written, beautifully constructed, very cleverly thought out, and so on. So congratulations, as per everything we've been talking about, and as you have made very, very clear. Your mind is good for another 20, 30 years, I think. I'll be long gone.
like that.
Anyway, what have I forgotten to ask or speak to or what? And then we'll wind her down here.
uh,
Anything?
I, uh, in terms of the record, I think we've covered everything.
Okay. Sorry, a big truck's driving by.
I hear that.
Oh, it's a fire engine. I live in the big city of Santa Barbara. Well, let's just kind of do a little bit of an overview, and I'll try and see if I can make up for some of my failings earlier, because I have a much clearer idea. We are speaking with Andrew Paul MacDonald. It's your 2022 Centre Disc release with Quatuor Saguenay, music of the City and the Stars, and that's part of what caught my attention. Music of the City and the Stars, and there's the harpist, the cover design. And now what, So anyway, you got us on cover design and this use of an electronic guitar. Lyra from 2020 is the first piece, through composed piece in 7 sections, if you will. These what do you call it? Mythological stories of Hermes and Apollo and Orpheus and the Argonauts and Hades and Eurydice and the Bacchanants. That sounds like my kind of people, and a kind of final, lovely memoriam to Orpheus to wind these 7 sections down. Again, string quartet, and in this case, the electric guitar fixed in a way that you have described earlier. So the sound quality is different and interesting, quite deliberately. Yeah. Okay. And then Restless City, which is much more straightforward in terms of the acousticness of it, from 2017. 3 movements: Bird Talk, Damaronics, and Monkin' Around. And I would say that your sense of humor is quite wonderful and marvelous. And I would say to everybody out there, because my crowd are mostly faculty artists and so on. Everybody's looking for repertoire. I would say Restless City for sure. I mean, that is just a no-brainer in terms of. Is it very hard, by the way?
Well, I work at it. For a good player. I mean, who else is playing electric archtop guitar out there? There must be somebody.
Or else you have a monopoly on gigs. Let's put that out there. Anyway, a little workshop, a little retreat, a little performance at Restless City, and then why not Lyra as well? Anyway, it's been a great pleasure chatting with you, Andrew, and I think we're done. I think we've just about covered it. As everybody knows, this will go up as a page at performingartsreview.net, and we'll have all the links to everybody and everything and how to buy the CD, and then I'll circle back later and really pay attention to the CD a little bit more than just stream of consciousness typing, and write up the review for you. So
wonderful.
That's it. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It's been a great pleasure meeting you. Now it's almost like in person, right?
Kind of, sort of, yeah. The connection's wonderful, so that makes a big difference. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah.
See ya.
Great. Okay.